So the day that the temple was destroyed is also a fast day?
Correct. That would be Tisha B'Av.
So two fast days for the same thing?
3. The 17th of Tammuz as well.
What is that for?
So that was when they actually breached through the city. So today is when they laid siege. Then about a year and a half later is when they breached the walls of the city of Jerusalem. And 3 weeks after that is when they destroyed the temple. Let us begin with a blessing before we learn Torah. We make a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al divrei Torah. We're holding at the bottom of page 48b. Okay. The Gemara recounts a story. So we've been talking about the different things that you add on the holidays and the festivals, etc. And the question is, what do you do if you forget to mention any of these items? And that's the discussion that we're going to start with today, and it'll take much of the discussion, and then we'll continue into the actual formula of the Zimun. The Gemara recounts a story. Rabbi Zera sat behind Rav Gidl in the study hall, and Rav Gidl was sitting before Rav Huna. And he sat and he said, one who made a mistake and did not mention the formula for Shabbat in grace after meals says the following abridged version instead. Blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who gave Shabbats for rest to his people Israel with love. As a sign and a covenant, blessed are you, Lord our God, who sanctifies the Shabbat. So even if you missed saying the special paragraph, which we call paragraph number 5 in our Grace After Meals papers, you have a special short blessing that you can make instead. Rav Huna said to him, who said this halacha? And he answered, Rav is the one who said this halacha. Again, Rav Gidl sat and said, one who erred and did not mention the formula for festivals in Grace After Meals, which would be the small paper that we used during the high holiday season. And if you forgot to say that special blessing, then you will say instead, blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who gave festivals to his people Israel for joy and for commemoration. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who sanctifies Israel and the seasons. Rav Huna asked him also, who said this halacha? And he answered, Rav. Again, Rav Gidl said and sat and said, if one erred and did not mention the new moon during the Grace After Meals, he says, blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who gave the new moon to his people Israel for commemoration. Rabbi Zera, who's now relating the incident, said, I don't remember if he mentioned joy in the formula or if he did not mention joy in the formula, whether he concluded this formula with a blessing as he did in the other formulas for Shabbat and festivals, or if he did not conclude it with a blessing. And I also don't remember whether he said that this was from his own self or whether it was also being him telling over what he learned from his teacher, Rav. The Gemara relates, Gidol, the son of Manyumi, was standing before Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman made a mistake and did not mention the special formula for Shabbat in Grace After Meals. So here we have a real story. He forgot to mention Shabbat, and what happened? What did he do? He returned to the beginning of Grace After Meals and he repeated the whole thing. Gidol bar Manyumi said to Rav Nachman, why did the master act in this manner? We just learned, you and I, that there's a special blessing you can make, and you don't have to go and start again from the beginning. And Rav Nachman answered that Rav Shela said in the name of Rav. Again, that's interesting because Rav is the same one who was being quoted as having said that if you made a mistake and you forgot to mention the special day in your prayers, in your grace after meal, I apologize, there's a special abridged blessing you can add instead of having to recite the entire grace after meals. So he said in the name of Rav, if one erred, he returns to the beginning. Gidol Bar Yumi challenged that from which we just learned. Didn't Rav Huna say in the name of Rav, if one erred, he recites this blessing that we just learned about? Rav Nachman said to him, wasn't it stated about this that Rabbi Menashe Bar Tachlifa said that the Rav said? They only taught that one recites the short blessing in a case where he did not yet begin reciting the next blessing, who is good and who does good. So if you forgot the formula, but you didn't yet start the next blessing, then you add a short blessing. However, if he already began reciting the next blessing, who is good and does good, he must return to the beginning of grace after meals. Rav Idi Bar Avin said that Rav Amram said that Rav Nachman said that Shmuel said, if one erred and did not mention the formula for the new moon in his Amida prayer, we require him to go to the beginning of the prayer and repeat it. However, if one erred and forgot to mention the new moon in grace after meals, we do not require him to return to the beginning and repeat it. So here he says there's a difference between grace after meals and the prayers. In the prayers, you would have to go back and repeat your prayers. However, in grace after meals, you would not. Rav Avin said to Rav Amram about this, what is the difference between the Amida prayer and grace after meals? He said to him, the question was also difficult, and I asked Rav Nachman about it. And why would you have to return and repeat the entire Amida prayer, but not the grace after meals? Let us see if we can analyze it ourselves. For the Amida prayer, which is an obligation, you have to pray every day, we require him to return to the beginning of prayer and repeat it. However, grace after meals, which is not an obligation, if you want to eat, you eat, and if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat, we do not require him to return to the beginning and repeat it. Grace after meals is not a full-fledged obligation. It is dependent upon eating, and eating is optional. Consequently, failure to mention the new moon in grace after meals is not such a source of concern. The Gemara asks, how could you give that as an answer? On Shabbat and on festivals, where there is a mitzvah to eat, so it is not possible to refrain from eating. There too, if he erred and failed to mention them in grace after meals, would you say that now he must return to the beginning and repeat it? He answered yes, as Rav Shela said in the name of Rav. If one erred, he returns to the beginning of grace after meals. And the Gemara asks, 1 second, we just learned that Rav Huna said that Rav said that if you made a mistake, you don't have to go back to the beginning. You just say this short blessing. The Gemara rejects this. Wasn't it stated about this? They only taught that one recites the short blessing in a case where he did not yet begin reciting, who is good and does good. However, if he already began reciting the next blessing, who is good and does good, he must return to the beginning of grace after meals. Hey, Chanchi. This is from yesterday. You want some water? Maybe when I'm done giving my class, I can make you a tea. You want me to do that? But right now, I'm teaching Gemara. You see? Chaim is here, Zalman is here, Aryak is here. Mm. Can make for you soon. Okay. Back in the Mishnah, the question was, how much do you have to eat in order to obligate those with whom they ate in Well, if you're going to scream at me, I'm not going to make you eat tea at all. I don't like the question. Okay, I'm teaching now, and when I'm done teaching, I'll be happy to make you a tea. If you want to stay here nice and quiet, then you're welcome to stay here. If you're going to be glitching, then you're going to not be allowed to be in here. Okay, because we can't be disturbing. So in the Mishnah, there was a dispute about how much one must eat to obligate those with whom they ate in a zimun. So the Tanakama, who is the first author in the Mishnah, but no elephant and no dinosaur. You want to be? Perfect, there's one here. And Rabbi Yehuda says an egg bulk. So usually, if the first author, meaning the first statement that is made, an authorless statement in the Mishnah, is usually attributed to Rabbi Meir. So he says an olive bulk, and Rabbi Yehuda said an egg bulk. So now the Gemara,
Rabbi, what is a bulk?
very good question. The answer is that for most measures in the Torah don't go by weight, they go by volume. So an egg bulk would be the volume of an egg, and an olive bulk would be the volume of an olive.
A single olive? One single olive?
One single medium-sized olive of those times. I'm gonna quickly check on Leah because she's screaming for something.
Sure.
I'll be right back in a second. What happened, Leah? What happened, please? I apologize for that. Zalman, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Real quick, yeah. So we see that Rabbi Meir says that you need an olive bulk, and Rabbi Yehuda says an egg bulk. The Gemara asks, is that to say that Rabbi Meir considers an olive bulk significant and Rabbi Yehuda considers an egg bulk significant? Let me ask you a question. What's larger, an egg or an olive?
Egg, obviously.
An egg, very good. An egg is actually twice the size of an olive. The question is, didn't we hear them say the opposite elsewhere? Let's look at another Mishnah. One who left Jerusalem and remembered that he had consecrated meat in his hand, and you're not allowed to take consecrated meat out of Jerusalem. If he had already passed Mount Scopus or anywhere that is a comparable distance from the temple, he burns the sanctified meat at the site where he is located. However, if he has not yet traveled that distance, he must return to burn it before the temple with the wood of the arrangement that was designated for burning consecrated items that have become disqualified. The Mishnah continues, how much meat must be in their possession in order to obligate them to go back? In other words, if you have just one crumb of meat, you don't have to go all the way back. Rabbi Meir said, no, because I need these stickers for me. No. Just this one? Okay. You can take this one, but none more. Rabbi Meir says one must return for an egg bulk of this. Rabbi Meir says that one must return for an egg bulk of sanctified meat. And before we mentioned what happens if you find chametz on Passover, how much do you have to burn? So if it's an egg bulk, then you have to burn it. If not, you don't have to worry about it. So he has to return for the egg bulk of sanctified meat, and he has to return to burn an egg bulk of leavened chametz. And Rabbi Yehuda says one must return for an olive bulk of this and of that. So their opinions seem to contradict their opinions in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that you need the bigger amount, the egg bulk, and that's what's considered significant. And Rabbi Meir said that an olive size is even considered significant. However, in this other Mishnah that we learned, it seems very clear that Rabbi Meir holds an egg bulk to be significant, and Rabbi Yehuda holds an olive bulk to be significant. To resolve this contradiction, Rabbi Yochanan said that we must have gotten something written down incorrectly, and the opinions must be reversed in one of these sources, and we have to amend the source. Abaya said, actually, no, you do not have to reverse them. And I have a way to answer it. Here, with regards to the Zimun, they disagree with regard to the interpretation of the verses. Rabbi Meir holds, and you shall eat, that is eating, and be satisfied, that is drinking after eating. And the halacha is in accordance with the standard halachic principle that eating is defined as the consumption of an olive bulk. So you have to make a blessing if you eat an olive bulk and drink. And Rabbi Yehuda holds, you shall eat and be satisfied, refers to eating that includes satisfaction. And eating just an olive bulk would not be enough for that. For that, you would need the larger size of an egg bulk. On the other hand, there, in the case of the leaven and the sanctified foods, they disagree not with regard to the interpret of the verses, but with regard to logical reasoning. Rabbi Meir holds the requirement to return consecrated food is analogous to its ritual impurity. And just as food that was consecrated is susceptible to ritual impurity only if it is the size of an egg bulk or more, if it is less than the size of an egg bulk, it does not contract impurity. So too, the requirement to return it is only when it is the size of an egg bulk. And Rabbi Yehuda holds differently. The requirement to return consecrated food is analogous to its prohibition. So too, it's just as its prohibition is only when it is the size of an olive bulk. So too, the requirement to return it is only when it is the size of an olive bulk. Next Mishnah. Going into the formula of the Zimun, we've discussed before that depending on how many people are present will determine the formula of the Zimun. Today, in all practicality, we only have two versions, one with 3 and one with 10. But let's see what we have over here. The Mishnah delineates distinctions in the halachos of the Zimun blessing based on the number of people present. How does one recite the Zimun? In a group of 3 people, the one reciting the Zimun says, let us bless the one from whose food we have eaten. If there's 3 people plus him, the one reciting the Zimun says, you should bless the one from whose food we have eaten. As even without him, there are enough people to recite the Zimun. With increasing the number of participants, the blessing is more complex. In a group of 10 people, the one reciting the Zimun says, let us bless our God. And in a group of 10 people plus him, the one reciting the Zimun says, you should bless our God. This formula is recited both in a group of 10 and in a group of 100,000. Now let's continue. In a group of 100 people, the one reciting the Zimun says, let us bless the Lord our God. If there's 100 people plus him, the one reciting the Zimun says, you should bless the Lord our God. Instead of we should bless, it's bless. In a group of 1,000 people, the one reciting the Zimun says, let us bless the Lord our God, the God of Israel. And if there's 1,000 people plus him, he says, bless the Lord our God, the God of Israel. In a group of 10,000 people, the one reciting the Zimun says, let us bless the Lord our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts, who sits upon the cherubs for the food that we have eaten. If there's 10,000 people plus him, the one reciting the Zimun says, Bless the Lord our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts, who sits upon the cherubs, for the food that we have eaten. The principle is just as he recites the blessing, so to those present recite in response. Blessed be the Lord our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts, who sits upon the cherubs, for the food that we have eaten. Okay, does anyone have a question with this line over here that I'm highlighting?
Well, in the following, it seems like the greater the number, you keep adding on to the blessing,
Very good. Perfect.
you know.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay.
And but but then that line seems to circle back.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a group of 10, then you say A, and if it's a group of 100, you say A and B, and if it's a group of 1,000, you say A, B, and C.
Yeah.
But then you go back to saying A.
Yeah. So I was going backwards in that line. That line was from the end of the first paragraph. And then we continued in the second paragraph to say 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Okay, it's a good question. We'll get to it soon. Actually, the Gemara is going to ask that question. On a similar note, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, according to the size of the crowd, they recite the blessing, as it is stated. Bless you, God, in full assemblies, even the Lord, you who are from the fountain of Israel. Rabbi Akiva said, there are no distinctions based on the side of the crowd. What do we find in the synagogue? Both when there are many and when there are few. As long as there is a minyan, the prayer leader says, Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. Oh, sorry, he says Baruch Hu es Hashem. And Rabbi Yishmael said that in the synagogue you said Baruch Hashem hamvorach. You know, they say a story. I hope you guys will get this. I think you will. There's this uncle and his nephew is having a bar mitzvah. So for months before the bar mitzvah, he's practicing the blessings for his aliyah. He finally gets up there and he says, Baruch Hu es Hashem hamvorach. And everyone responds, the whole crowd in unison, Baruch Hashem hamvorach lolam va'ed. And he turns around to them, he says, shut up, I know it. And because the congregation responds that, and then the one who's leading says that as well. No, Hannah. Hannah, no. It's very pretty, right? I know, but Hannah, you already used two of these. Oh no, wait, there's some more here that you didn't take yet. 6 more that you can use. Okay, so Zalman, the Gemara is going to ask your question, but before we get there, Shmuel said one should never exclude himself from the collective. If there's a group, you should always include yourself with the group. The Gemara raises a challenge from what we just learned in our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if there's him plus the 3, the one reciting the Zimun says, bless, as an instruction. Bless the one from whose food we have eaten. So he's excluding himself from the collective. The Gemara answers, say that the meaning of the Mishnah is, he may even say bless. Nevertheless, let us bless is preferable, as Rav Ada bar Abba said, that they said in the school of Rav. We learned a group of 6 to 10 people may divide into 2 groups, each forming its own zimun. However, a group of 10, which invokes God's name in the zimun, may not divide into 2 groups, as that would negate the opportunity to invoke God's name. The Gemara proceeds, granted, if you say, let us bless is preferable, that is why 6 people who ate together are allowed to split into 2 groups of 3. However, if blessed would have been preferable, then they should not be permitted to divide into 2 groups, because neither group would be able to say bless. Rather, mustn't one conclude from this? Let us bless is preferable, as the one reciting the zimun is not excluding himself from the group. The Gemara sums up the discussion. Indeed, conclude from this that is the case. That was also taught in the Tosefta. Whether he said bless and whether he said let us bless, we do not reprimand him for doing so. And the punctilious, is that how you pronounce the word?
Yes.
The grammar Nazis reprimand him for doing so. And the Gemara said, as a rule, from the style of one's blessing, it is obvious whether or not he is a Torah scholar. How so? For example, Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi says, in a Zimun, one who recites, blessed be the one from whose food we have eaten, and by whose goodness we live, he is a Torah scholar. However, one who recites, blessed be the one from whose food we have eaten, and from whose goodness we live, he is an ignoramus. Wait, let's read this again because I didn't see the difference between the two. Blessed be the one from whose food we have eaten, and by whose goodness we live. Blessed be the one from whose food. I'm gonna make you tea soon. 15 minutes. We'll see, maybe. Blessed be the one from whose food we have eaten, and from whose goodness. Oh, and from whose goodness we live. Okay. If you said by whose goodness we live, with his goodness we live, then you are a Torah scholar. If you say from his goodness we live, then you're ignoramus, because that expression insinuates that only some of God's goodness was bestowed upon him, which is tantamount to a denial of God's loving kindness.
I don't see that.
Too
It
much of
seems
a
like
difference.
I mean, it's just a matter of syntax. I mean, is that a good translation?
I mean, what's the difference between by whose and from whose? By whose?
I'm not sure exactly the best way to translate this, uvetuvoi or mituvoi. But it seems that the concept over here is that the Torah scholar is saying, thank you, God, for giving me abundant kindness. And the ignoramus is saying, God gave me a little bit of kindness today. I woke up and, but I could still use more kindness from God today.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what it seems like.
Yeah.
No, I don't see that. I don't see the difference.
The difference in the words or in the concept?
I see the difference in the word, obviously, but I don't see the difference. But I don't see that explanation holds. You could say by you're assuming that that the word by
No,
means
the word by here is
total.
not good. The word here should be in or with.
I think you're saying that. I think you're suggesting that by whose is like God is withholding something back.
No, from whose is holding something back.
From whose that God is holding back from me. He's not really giving me what he could be giving me.
What I understand from here is like when you say from, it's like yeah, I kind of see what you are saying, Rabbi. I think that by means like you're taking like God is giving everything, like all the goodness, but from, I think it's like translation that's a little
Well,
bit
I think what you said about translating with is better.
Yeah.
I think with whose goodness makes more sense
Right.
because with is more inclusive than from.
Right. Exactly.
But by is not more inclusive than from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, with would be
I
with
agree.
would be
Yeah,
better.
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
Perfect. However, Abaye said to Rav Dimi, 1 second. What about King David? King David articulated his prayer in that manner, and he said, be pleased, therefore, to bless your servant's house, that it abide before you forever. For you, Lord God, have spoken. And from your blessing, may your servant's house be blessed forever. So David is saying, from your blessing. The Gemara answers, nah, over here, he's not thanking God for the blessings. He's asking God for a blessing. So if you're asking God for a blessing, you can say, God, please can I have some of your blessing? Like the famous joke about the guy who comes to God and says, God, is it true that for you, $1 billion is like 1 cent? He says, yeah. He says, is it true that 1,000 years is like 1 day? He says, yeah. The guy says, so can I have $1 billion? And God says, sure, wait a second.
That was good.
Yeah. So when we're receiving from God, we say, thank you, God, you're giving me so much goodness. When we're asking from God, we say, God, please give me a little bit of your goodness. Let's read that inside. The Gemara answers, in the case of a request that is different, that it is inappropriate to demand the full bounty of God's blessing. 1 second. The Gemara questions this. In the case of request 2, is it not written that a request for the full bounty of God's blessing is granted? As King David himself writes in Psalms, open your mouth wide that I will fill it. What one receives corresponds to what he requests. The Gemara answers, no. Open your mouth wide that I will fill it is written with regard to matters of Torah, where you're asking God to fill your knowledge with Torah, and over there it is wholly appropriate to make excessive requests to ask of God to help you learn Torah and do mitzvahs in the most exceptional way. However, for your own personal blessings, it is appropriate only to ask God that he give you from his kindness. On the topic of the Zimun formula, it was taught in a Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, one who recites in a Zimun and by whose goodness we live, he is a Torah scholar. However, if he says, and by his goodness they live, then he is a fool, because he has excluded himself from the collective. The sages of Naharbala taught the opposite. In their opinion, they live is preferable because it is a more inclusive formula, whereas we live is more limited and personal. Nonetheless, the Gemara concludes the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of the sages of Naharbala, and we should say, and by whose goodness we live. On a similar note, Rabbi Yochanan said, one who recites in a zimun, let us bless the one whose food we have eaten. Let us bless the one by whose food we have eaten. He is a Torah scholar. However, if one recites, let us bless to him from whose food we have eaten, he is an ignoramus because it seems that he is blessing the host of the meal. That H over here should not be capitalized. There's an ad playing on their video. Okay, I'll be right back. 1 second. I apologize. The little ones don't have school today. Okay. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, questioned this and said to Rav Ashi, what about during the Seder? We say to he who performed all of these miracles for our ancestors and for us, and we use the expression to he who. And didn't you just say that to he who looks like we're talking to the host? Rav Ashi said, wow, nobody thinks that the host is the one who performed miracles for our grandfathers. He said, yay. There, in the case of miracles performed for our ancestors and for us, it is self-evident that the blessing is referring to God, who performs miracles, the Holy One, blessed be He. In the case of food, however, it is not self-evident, because the host of the meals also was involved in providing the food. Rabbi Yochanan said with regard to the formula of the Zimun, that one who recites in a Zimun, blessed be the one from whose food we have eaten, is a Torah scholar. But if he says, blessed be the one for the food we have eaten, is an ignoramus. Because over there, it appears that he is blessing the host of the meal. How? From where? Yeah. Because if he was blessing God, why would he restrict the blessing to food? He's saying, blessed be God for the food that we have eaten, as opposed to, blessed be God that we have eaten from him. Rav Huna, I think this is all semantics, but it is what it is. Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, said, we only said this halacha with regard to a zimun of 3 when there is no mention of God's name. In a zimun of 10, however, where there is mention of God's name, it is self-evident to whom the blessing refers, as we learned in our Mishnah. Just as he recites the blessing, so too do those present recite in response, blessed be the Lord our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts, who sits upon the cherubs for the food that we have eaten. Okay, now here comes the question that Zalman asked. We learned in our Mishnah with regard to the formula of the Zimun. This formula is recited both in a group of 10 and in a group of 100,000. The Gemara raised an objection. The Mishnah itself is difficult. On the one hand, you said that this formula is recited both in a group of 10 and in a group of 100,000. Consequently, the two cases are the same. And then it went ahead and taught in a group of 100 people, what do you say? In a group of 1,000 people, what do you say? In a group of 10,000 people, what do you say? Evidently, the formula does depend on the number of people. So here comes the answer. Rav Yosef said this is not difficult, as these two statements are the opinions of different sages. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Aglili, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, as we learned in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yosef Agalili says, according to the size of the crowd, they recite the blessing. As it is stated, bless you, God, in full assemblies, even the Lord, you who are from the fountain of Israel. We also learned in our Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva said that there are no distinctions based on the side of the crowd. By looking at the synagogue, both when there are many and when there are few, as long as we have a minyan, the prayer leader says, Baruch Hu es Hashem. In the case of grace after meals as well, the formula will remain the same regardless of the number of people participating in the Zimun. So Rabbi Yosef Aglili says, depending on the size of the crowd will depend on the blessing that you make. And Rabbi Akiva says, whether it's 10 or whether it's 100,000, you make the same blessing. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Akiva, what is he going to do with the verse cited by Rabbi Yosef Agalili, which seems to imply that depending on the size of the crowd, you should make different blessings? The Gemara answers he needed to derive something else which was taught in the Brisa. Rabbi Meir says, from where do we know that even the fetuses who were in their mother's womb were reciting the song with the Jews at the Red Sea, when the sea parted and the Jewish people came out on dry land? As it is stated in the chapter of Psalms describing the Exodus from Egypt, and it says, in the assemblies bless God, bless the Lord from the source of Israel. So if we're talking about the source of Israel, the source of every Jewish person is in the womb of their mother. So they were blessing even while they were still in their source, even in the wombs of their mothers, they were blessing.
So the Rabbi Akiva, when he said whether it's 10 or 100,000, but what about all the ones in between? Is he saying that that whole formula that the other rabbi was talking about is out the window? That
Correct.
It doesn't matter? Okay.
Correct. He said if you have 3, you say without God's name. Once you hit 10, you have God's name, and you just say the same formula, even if there's 100,000 people there. So he needs this verse in the assemblies of Israel, in the assemblies, blessed the God, the Lord, from the source of Israel, is teaching us that even the fetuses were blessing God. Actually, the Medrash tells us that the wombs of the mothers became transparent like glass, and the kids were able to see what was going on, and they were able to praise God together with everyone else. And from where does the other sage, Rabbi Yosef, I guess all the parents knew if their kids were male or female. You know, they got the a glimpse into the ultrasound. The Gemara asks, what about Rabbi Yosef? Where does he derive the matter of the singing of the fetuses? The Gemara answers, he derives it from the words, the source of Israel, which he interprets as allusion to the womb. So I guess Rabbi Akiva was learning it from the words in assemblies, that where is within the assembly is within the people themselves, within the mothers. Let's see if we can finish this. Here, Rava said, the halacha, Chana, take that out of my room, please, if you want to keep turning it, because it's making... Rava said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that it doesn't matter how many people there are, you say the same blessing. The Gemara recounts that Ravina and Rav Chama Barbuzi happened to come to a banquet at the house of the Exilarch. At the end of the meal, Rav Chama rose and was seeking to gather a group of 100 participants in the meal so that the zimun for 100 could be recited. Ravina said to him, you do not need to do so, as Rabbah declared the following, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, and the formula remains the same regardless of the number of people participating in the zimun, so long as we have 10. Okie dokie, we're gonna stop share here. Thank you all for joining us. We have a bunch of stuff coming up. I'll help you in a minute. We have a bunch of stuff coming up. We have tomorrow our class titled humility. It's going to be a blessing in strength through humility, I think, or power through humility. And it's going to be discussing the two sons of Joseph when they came to be blessed by their grandfather Jacob. And famously, Jacob, instead of putting his right hand on the older one and his left hand on the younger one, he switched his hands, and the right hand went on the younger one. And then put it down, Hannah, and then take out the giraffe, and then try again. Then on Thursday, we have our Lunch and Learn, Salmon and Salads. We will be discussing the difference between American law and Jewish law on torts incurred when you're trying to save your life or someone else. Are you able to steal in order to save your life? And to what is your relationship with others? Do you have an obligation, or are you even allowed to save someone else's life? That's on Thursday. Then on Shabbat morning, God willing, we will be having a minyan this week. Zalman and Chaim, are you guys up and around for a minyan this week, Shabbat morning?
Could be.
Zalman could be, Chaim.
Okay.
Sorry?
Could be. Sweet.
Could be,
Same
we'll
response.
see. Okay, I hope to see you both tomorrow morning. Hope to see you all on Thursday at, I believe, 12:30. Take care, enjoy your day, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Okay.